About a year ago, you and I had a very unusual opportunity. What was it, you ask? It was to drive a pre-production prototype of a car that never really existed on these shores, a go-fast Hyundai that was front-wheel drive. Now yes, there was an Elantra Sport that came before it, but that never really had almost 300 horsepower. So you and I cheerfully drove this vehicle and then handed back a laundry list of potential changes. Well, Hyundai called. They said the final product is ready, and we could sample it at Sonoma Raceway. Before you and I head out to the track, we need to understand what makes this Elantra different from other Elantras. And that would absolutely be the same engine we drove in the pre-production prototype last year, which is the 2-liter, 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. Now that should sound very familiar from the Veloster Ns we've driven. Now you may remember in the first year of production of the Veloster Ns, they had two different outputs. There was a 260 horsepower, and then with the Sport package, there was a 276 horsepower. Now it's just the 276 horsepower and 289 pound-feet of torque. Now Hyundai does offer something called an N giggle mode or something like that. It's an overboost function like we've driven in Porsches, and it adds an extra 10 horsepower for a short period of time. Now this engine in an Elantra N is on offer like the Veloster in a manual 6 forward gears or 8 forward gears as a DCT. We will talk more about that in an upcoming episode. We are driving the manual today. There's a couple of things that stand out about this package. One has to do with the engine. It's a 52 millimeter turbine wheel, so this is an unusual package in a vehicle of this size. And then something else I find very interesting, nothing to do with the engine, but more supporting the engine. It has a chassis strut brace in the back, basically behind the rear seat. Now you may ask, what is the importance of a fancy red brace that in reality decreases both the functionality and practicality of this vehicle? Answer, it increases the lateral stiffness. Now before you and I go test that theory, I do feel compelled to point out one practical item, and that would be the fuel economy. Here, believe it or not, it is not horrific, 22, 31, 25 combined, but like in the old times, if it had the automatic transmission, the fuel economy would be worse. It has been an incredibly long time since you and I have been on Sonoma Raceway, something like 8 years. So unusually good to be back. This time with a completely different equation. The drive wheels are there, not there, and it is a significantly smaller engine. Viper was the last time. But this one, that changes the weight. 3,186 pounds, or depending on express your weights and measures, 1,445 kilograms. Now this one I have chosen as God intended, 3 pedals, but if it had 2 pedals, it would be about 110 pounds more with that. Okay, let's go. This is such a good feeling to be back. Now this track, it's technical, lot of elevation changes, and this is kind of the right tool for the job here with all the technical parts. There are some bits where you get some heavy straights here, and that's where we can understand some of this engine. We've driven it before in many other Hyundai, Kia, Genesis products. Here, I would argue this is kind of more than the sweet spot. It is just a magnificent balance of power to weight. And it's not just that, it's actually that plus a really good manual transmission. It's not just let's be thankful because we have a manual, which in today's day and age, I can only think of 2 other cars. One is about $110,000, that's a 992, and 2 would be the direct competitor to this car, which would be the GTI. Now this, it's a different experience with this engine, not just because of the way it delivers power. God, it sounds good doing that. That's part of the personality of this thing. Now something came up at a discussion I had with Albert Bierman before I drove this thing. He flat out said, look man, torque steer, it's a thing on front wheel drive vehicles, and it is what it is. So instead of looking at it as a bug, we look at it as a feature and kind of tune it, kind of make it part of the personality of the vehicle. And yeah, you notice it if you try to be a hooligan, and frankly, it's kind of fun, but driving it here on this track, it doesn't get in the way of power delivery. No, it is not that time to play your favorite game on the options game because we don't have any pricing. Went all the way up to Sonoma and chatted with a couple of folks at Hyundai, and they say that pricing will not be available until the car is closer to its on sale date, which I believe will be towards the end of this year, early next year. However, they did share a tidbit of information. They said, well, how much do you think a Veloster N is? And there it's about $32,500. They say we will be pleasantly surprised, which means lower priced. I would guess maybe the first number will be a 2. I hope the first number will be a 2. Perhaps the second number may be an 8, and the third nowhere near a 9. That's what I'm guessing. Now, that's good news. However, I have some bad news to share with you. Remember our good friend Mikey? He just got married. We were all excited about that. Well, we said to him, dear Mikey, we would like a sunroof in an Elantra N. And the good news is he got one for us. The bad news is you have to make a choice. If you want a sunroof, you have to lose one pedal. So before we press on, you know what I'm going to ask here. Let's send some emails, or really comments, to our friend Mikey. Dear Mikey, we would like a sunroof with a manual transmission. Now, I do like kind of beating on this guy because we get what we want out of him when we do that. And we did ask in the previous episode for a couple of things, which he gave us as standard in both the 6-speed manual as well as DCT, and that would be heated seats, as well as the special sport seats that have both kind of like an ultra suede, and then it's got a leather bolster on it. I don't know if they're made by Recaro. They look like they're made by Recaro, and they certainly feel like it. I do have to admit, I spent some time in both this manual transmission car as well as a DCT car. Got a lot of track time with it. The seats are stellar. And if this vehicle comes in genuinely below $30,000 and has those seats with that color and trim, like the tactile feel, I will be impressed. Yeah, I'd love a different choice than a black interior, especially with that cool N, I guess, Korean racing blue, whatever they're calling it. It does stand out. I've seen a couple of colors on this vehicle. They had a red one there, I believe a black one. The white, absolutely the worst color, believe it or not, was the black, because you don't see the details of this car. You notice in this one, we can see the changes in the grille, and it really stands out. It makes a difference in the vehicle when it's parked. In the black, it looks like pretty much any other Elantra. This one in the blue is about the best. I would argue red is a very close runner-up. White, it just, no creativity. Anyway, the most important thing we have learned today is, dear Mike E., we would like a sunroof with a manual transmission. Okay, so as much as you and I love this engine, or really we should say have a lot of experience with it, this is much more about the driving dynamics. And there, a bit of a recap from the pre-production prototype we drove last year. The ride height changes here. It's lowered by about 15 or 20 mils, a trick they steal from Porsche, and here it's to very good effect. There's unusually good control over pitch as well as squat, something that's hard to do in a front-wheel drive vehicle. Then the other change they make here, an electronic limited slip differential. Now, it doesn't sound fancy, but in a front-wheel drive car, it is fancy. There's very few front-wheel drive vehicles that offer it, and here it's welcome in a vehicle that has almost 300 horsepower. But the benefit is, this is how they tune the torque steer we were talking about earlier. This is how they balance everything from power delivery to the weight of the steering. Like, for example, there's good feedback, it's balanced. However, the weight is unusually good here, which is something hard to do in a front-wheel drive vehicle. Then there are the brakes, 14.2-inch diameter rows in the front, 12.4 in the rear. What they've done is they've pilfered larger brakes from a larger vehicle. So they've got this brake package that still has a floating caliper, but it works for this application, even on a track. I'm pushing it kind of hard here, and frankly, people were pushing this thing very hard before I got into the vehicle. I don't feel fade. I don't feel an issue in terms of bringing almost 3,200 pounds of weight to a stop. So does it need the, say, calipers that are from Brembo or some other fancy operator? I don't think so, and I think that's how they can arrive at a price point where this is not like an AMG CLA 45. The last one we drove was, what, $64,000? Yeah, it's a lot fancier hardware, but in terms of equation, this is very similar, minus the all-wheel drive. So you and I find ourselves in a rather unusual position because we already knew we liked this vehicle last year in pre-production prototype form. But now that we've sampled the final product, I can unequivocally say it is unusually good. And here's why it's good. It's not trying to be the perfection of a GTI. In fact, it's trying to be perfectly imperfect, and that's what I love about it. Which brings us to the wish list, and you kind of know where I'm going here. We already touched upon the topic of Mike's faux pas with the whole sunroof debacle. And really the thing here, it's more than just the sunroof, and putting my joking aside, really not joking with Mike and the sunroof. It's about what these vehicles represent. I spent some time with the folks who are running the Hyundai N division, and their whole goal is not just making a hot hatch type performance car. They're looking to get enthusiasts to get excited about their cars and evangelize their cars. They already did that in Europe, and now they're trying to do it in America. And my suggestion, my feedback back to you guys would be, let's do a little bit more customization to the cars. Because think about it, yeah, we can have a race car and put numbers on it like this, but I see people who get excited, like enthusiasts that get excited about performance cars that aren't 911s, that aren't 150 grand. They want to make them their own, within reason. How about a couple of more different color choices, maybe some changing colors on the inside, definitely the sunroof for the manual transmission, maybe some other options to make the car stand out so they don't all look the same when you go to cruise it. Anyway, this is one man's opinion, and this is the point of the episode where I turn this around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV, all one word, MotoManTV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I once again humbly request your help with the algorithm. What does that mean? Yes, click subscribe, notifications, but most importantly, click like and share these episodes with your friends on all your socials. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später. Oh, and just so you know, the reason why I have the window open at the track, it's a rule here at Sonoma. I don't know why they make us do this. It's incredibly annoying because we've got two Where to Racing folks here, and they're like, their cars have fixed glass. Granted, it's not glass like this, but it's still fixed glass. Are we going that fast? No. But you know what? Feedback to Sonoma, can we just put the windows up? It's fine, especially if I've got a helmet.